This is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Welcome to the May 4th Eve special. Our program, produced for documentary purposes, focuses on groups that claim an energy field or blood parasite known as the Force can control minds, seduce people to become evil, give you knowledge, or obey your wishes.
Groups of these so-called sorcerers have circulated the story that they have protected the peace for thousands of years, while new religious groups, calling themselves the Christians, are developing their own religious organization that claims it was the basis for the religion practiced by those who believe in the Force.
3 bounty hunters with experience in tracking down force-peddling con artists will now take us through the various claims by the Christians to debunk them, one and all.
Hello and welcome to Freethought Forum, May the 4th Eve special, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am Chad the Bounty Hunter.
I'm Larry the Bounty Hunter.
And I'm Forceless Forrest the Bounty Hunter.
We want you to know that if you don't believe in the Force, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of hokey religions. Today's program was pre-recorded, then shoved into an astromech droid, so we will not be taking any calls.
Now we'd like to tell viewers about the show's sponsors. Visit our websites at www.rationalist.org or http://knoxvilleatheist.org.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's Cantina in the Old City Spaceport, starting around 5:30. Be cautious, the Old City Spaceport can be a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of the God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Greedo the Bounty Hunter says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour of food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or shoot first, please don't.
And the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures, lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday we hold a Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday we're mixing it all up, sometimes with a get-together we call Reflections Meeting. It features potluck lunch in someone's home. Sometimes we play board games and watch a movie or similar activities. And now and then we have a blood drive as well.
Today's show is in observance of May the 4th, better known as Star Wars Day. May 4th was chosen for the easy pun on the phrase, "May the Force be with you." The pun was also used to congratulate Margaret Thatcher upon being elected UK Prime Minister.
The focus of today's discussion is the myth of the Force and copycat myths known as denominations of Christianity that have popped up across the galaxy claiming that the Force, which was never been shown to exist, is based on this Christianity. Followers of this parody religion have come to claim that our holiday, known as Laugh Day, is in celebration of the birth of their cult leader, whose fatherless birth parallels the story of our Anakin Skywalker.
Well, if you're like me, you first became aware of this hokey religion just before the Battle of Yavin. Since that time, many elements that are clearly random chance have been associated with some supernatural intervention by something known as the Force.
We've analyzed the data recorded by our droid co-pilots. These are statements and events where weak minds claim sorcery is behind random events.
From stolen data tape number 4, codenamed A New Hope, various entries in the logs that could have been some religious significance.
I'll take this first one. We have C-3PO saying, "Thank the Maker." So what do we think about that? There was no further information of who this Maker was.
Yeah, well, it could be the one making the robots. I don't know.
Well, we have maintenance records that shows the droid's memory was wiped many times before that. So if there was some maker, this droid would have no knowledge. And being that he was recently acquired by a new owner, I would say the droid is merely trying to anthropomorphize himself or be more like his owner.
Aha. So, since this droid describes himself as a human cyborg relations or protocol droid, anthropomorphizing stuff would be part of his natural programming, you say?
Correct.
So, if he was talking about a maker, if he was aware at one time he had a maker, that's been gone, and now he's just appealing to a vague, unnamed general maker.
Like so many of us do. So many Christians and religious folk do.
And force users.
And force users. And Obi-Wan, well, he said, the force is an energy field.
Surrounds us and binds us together. So, well, heck, I think there is an energy field that binds us together. We call it gravity, don't we?
We do. And the strong force and the weak force, they're the ones that really hold us together.
They bind our molecules together. But there's no evidence that they interact with or obey our will.
Or anyone's will.
Or give us insight into events, future or past. Bounty Hunter Chad, what did you think on that?
I think it's a very vague conversation filler. I think there are a lot of things that you could quantify or vaguely describe as an energy field. Magnetism, heat is an energy field.
But of course, they're real. They've been demonstrated. They can be demonstrated by repeatable experiments.
And under the right circumstances, you can make use of them. You know?
So, this explanation of this charlatan Obi-Wan, this sorcerer, this came at the question of a young, naive moisture farmer, Luke Skywalker, who said, you know, he asked about the Force because it was alleged by this charlatan Obi-Wan that Luke's father was also a Jedi Knight and used the Force to guard peace and justice for 1,000 generations. It's kind of amazing that there could be these knights guarding peace and justice for 1,000 generations, and Luke's never heard of them?
Not only that, but what about all the injustice that the Empire has been wreaking on the galaxy for all those generations? Where's the Force then?
It would appear that this Force just kind of might do something and might not do something. It's about the same as not being there.
Right.
It
Right.
seems like the Force is equivalent to convenience.
Or luck.
So, but apparently these charlatans have convinced a lot of people around the galaxy, not merely Luke, who stumbled into this desert wizard, as his uncle was calling him, but even there are people in the Empire who have been misled by these alleged Force users. So
Admiral Motti and Darth Vader had an exchange where Admiral Motti said, "Your sad devotion to that ancient religion hasn't helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes or given you clairvoyance enough." And at that point, it's written that Vader began to choke Admiral Motti from several feet away.
raised his hand.
And his voice went dead.
And there's only one account of that.
Only one account of that. These data tapes we've recovered you're referring to?
And it's entirely possible that there was a error in the data tape or an error writing the data tape.
Or the person writing it was just making stuff up to make it interesting.
You don't think that the fact that he was about to say hidden fortress might have something to do with this, Chad?
We'll investigate that later.
We'll investigate that later. All righty.
The Force can, as Obi-Wan always said, the Force can have a strong influence on the weak mind.
It would appear that that might be maybe that the Force can sometimes have a strong influence on those who don't observe real well. Modern magicians do that all the time.
Or people who don't have a grasp of evidence and how important that is when you're trying to make an argument or explain something.
Just critical analysis is a taught skill, and so this Force or magicians can have a strong influence on those who are not taught to think critically. Chad.
This sounds like the basis for any good con game. Any time it's demonstrated where somebody fell for a scam or some sort of smuggling, there's probably some part where they could have picked it up and they just weren't trained how to identify it.
So from these recovered data tapes, the first of which was recovered turns out to have been episode 4, we have this reference to a religion. Admiral Mati, or however his name is pronounced, refers to it as a religion. But don't religions usually involve things like ritual behavior and things like that? We haven't seen much in the way of ritual behavior, have we?
Not really. No sacraments.
I've not witnessed it.
We've not seen a communal gathering. No real holidays yet that we know of.
Specific practices.
Actually, I can think of one, and that is ancient weapons. Unlike this modern weapon here, they use a hokey weapon. What do they use?
A lightsaber.
Oh, a lightsaber.
A lightsaber, which reaches about as far as a sword reaches, not across the room. So, does seem like that's kind of a poor choice. If you can just simply stay away from someone with that meter-long stick and send some blaster bolts into them, it's game over for them. So, that's an example of a hokey weapon and a sort of ritual behavior.
Yeah, their only rituals that I've seen, though, is just practicing with the sword. They don't get together communally and do anything like that. So that's kind of strange.
All right.
Grand Moff Tarkin and his statement to Vader that you, my friend, are all that's left of their religion.
So I guess if you're the only one left, you don't have anyone to have any community with.
That would explain the lack of
rituals with
gatherings. But I think it may have been a way to separate Vader from his previous beliefs, which would create a vacuum, and Vader would bind to the Empire's beliefs or motivations. It also might stroke Vader's ego if he was the last one. It's always good to feel like you're the only one. It makes you feel important.
Mm-hmm. Lonely, though.
So we're also treated to some scenes where the Obi-Wan charlatan is trying to coax Luke into thinking Luke has some sort of sense of the Force. And how does he do it? He uses a remote control device. And let's see, a remote control device. Do you suppose that he could maneuver that such that Luke thinks he had defeated it?
Well, if he can maneuver other things telekinetically, I would think he could.
Well, but it's a remote control device. He might have a little thing in his pocket and he's running his thumb control around.
But
here.
a Jedi Knight wouldn't need that, I wouldn't think.
If it's going to fly within a ship, it's got to be under some control. Otherwise, it's probably going to cause some damage to the inside of that ship.
Or it itself perhaps could be programmed to fall on the sword, so to speak. I say good against remotes is not the same as good against the living.
I think Han Solo said that, didn't he?
I may have quoted the data tapes.
The data
there.
tapes, right.
And what else did Han Solo say?
Later, Han Solo said to Luke, "May the Force be with you," as if Solo all of a sudden believed in the Force.
Yep.
But what did he say before that? Hokey religions and ancient weapons. I've been from one end of this galaxy to another, and I've seen a lot of strange things. But nothing convinces me that there's some all-controlling force. He claimed to be in charge of his own destiny.
And his actions later showed that he, whether he believed in the Force or not, he at least had some concern for Luke. And if someone you have concern for is about to go to war, whether you believe in their beliefs or not, you might give them a little bit of motivation by wishing them well in the way they like to hear it.
In other words, it was recognizing a polite fiction.
And George Lucas, who wrote stories and made movies about the battles of Yavin, the Battle of Hoth, was quoted as saying, "I put the Force into the movies and the stories in order to try and awaken a certain kind of spirituality in young people, more a belief in God than a belief in any particular religious system. Not having enough interest in the mysteries of life to ask that question, is there a God or is there not a God, that is for me the worst thing that can happen."
So what we have here apparently is the log keeper who made these records has indicated that he has tampered with them with a purpose in mind. It would appear to me that there's no reason to treat these records with any credulity whatsoever, and that he is perhaps borrowing simply from other myth-based traditions.
That's exactly right. He wrote it to get popularity.
So perhaps he had read some of Earth's myth-based traditions where we have examples of virgin births and resurrections, and he could have easily borrowed from any of them to come up with the story behind the fatherless birth of Anakin Skywalker, which is revealed in data tape number 1, which was the 4th data tape to be recovered, as I recall.
Right, right.
That's a very common storyline in the history of the planet, and I'm sure most planets.
Well, I believe that, the ancient Romans, and maybe I think it has a ancient Persian influence, had a god Mithras, who was born without a mother, who just magically emerged from a rock.
And the Egyptians as well.
I guess also there's some stories told that the Buddha may also have been born in, let's say, a mysterious way. I think I've heard it's like he emerged from the side of his mother's womb, because I guess just because that makes it seem more
Cleaner.
Unusual.
Seems like all these religions want to avoid the birth canal for some reason or another.
It does seem like they've got to change the regular way that the world works in order to bolster their claim of some things being special, and that's why they should be listened to, or perhaps, maybe more importantly, that's why they should be given alms.
I've always wondered if there was an overt intent to either obscure or completely hide the family line, because if you put together a story where a child has no father, what if that child's father had a terrible reputation? That would be some motivation to do such a thing. So,
well, I was thinking of other traditions, and that is that if you have someone you're going to claim is supernatural, there's sort of this awkward point where they're just a child, and just even having parents who've got to, potty train them and spank them seems awkward for the supernatural. And so making the childhood somehow not normal maybe helps hide that.
It also helps people who grew up with an odd childhood to identify with that person more. If they were maybe weak or small or couldn't handle themselves well, then they could identify with this heroic figure.
Well, when you say heroic, it would appear that the Luke Skywalker story is just borrowed from many tales of a youth coming of age. I believe that here on the planet Earth, there are people who have talked about such stories being classic. Even in the ancient literature on this planet, from the Greek tradition, we have a coming-of-age story in Homer's Iliad. In the Odyssey. Although that story is principally about Odysseus making his way back home after the battle at Troy, back at home, his son Telemachus is growing up and is having to face adversity without his father there, and so it's sort of forcing him into adulthood as part of a plot element on that. Telemachus has to try to help his mother ward off these unwanted suitors, people who want to marry Penelope, because that would entitle them to all of Odysseus's wealth. And Telemachus would then be left out. And Penelope wasn't necessarily keen on marrying any of these people either.
Right. I'm beginning to see why your Bounty Hunter Guild went with the Greek theme.
Well, the Greeks are great warriors.
They are.
And also great storytellers. So within the recovered data tapes, the fourth tape recovered, which is actually the earliest tape, does begin to talk about the Jedi having a building called a temple. What goes on in this temple?
As I recall, I've only examined the tape a few times, but as I recall, it is a training facility for younglings.
So get them while they're young. How young were they?
I would say 6 to 8 years old.
All right,
That's
so they're not
young enough.
toddlers, but
Young
they're
enough.
they're not critically thinking yet. And in fact, many times here on Freethought Forum, we've asked callers if, when they chose their religion, were they 6 years old? And a few of them have been honest enough to answer yes. So there at the temple, we had these older people practicing these rituals. Maybe they had some technology that might be used to impress, perhaps,
Younger
fool.
minds.
Yes, the younger minds.
It was common for the younglings to use remotes to practice lightsaber work shoulder to shoulder, as dangerous as that seems. But there was a library or a system of record, and frequently meetings of the Jedi Council, which was little more than a political decision-making body.
It strikes me that they were, for someone who's supposed to have all this great insight, they sure seem to be in the dark about all of the important things. The fact that they would have to send some of their people out in spaceships to go visit places to get knowledge of events seems to be inconsistent with claims made in latter data tapes.
Right. Some of the claims the Force, or claims of the powers that the Force can provide, defeat the concept of having to send out pilots to spy on star systems, especially with the convenience that a probe droid that's been used many times. The facilities, those things would offer, just make one wonder why did we send people when either the Force could have done it or a droid could have done it. It's as if there is multiple trust issues layered in there.
Alrighty. So it is in that first data tape that we learn about the temple, we learn about the Jedi Council, but in that first data tape there is also, we are introduced to this Anakin character who is alleged to have been without a father, and he's gonna grow up, and apparently he's raised by all of these monks who don't have the normal social interaction with people, and that doesn't seem to turn out real well. Meaning most of these Jedi monks are apparently commanded to be celibate, and that doesn't seem to work. Like, as right here in the real world, when we have organizations that are commanded like that,
They usually
things go
fall
wrong.
apart.
So, in the second movie, Anakin has now become a young man, and what happens is natural with all young men, and what is that?
Falls in love.
He meets a young woman, and they certainly have adventures. So this parallels these stories of youth growing up. One of the things that they encounter, though, is the political intrigue of a whole galaxy, because it just so happens to be that the young woman is what?
She's a senator.
A senator. Prior to that, she was
Princess.
what? Even more?
The Queen.
That's right. She was called Queen. It's kind of amazing that someone who is depicted as, I guess, mid-teens is called a queen.
It happens. It's a birth thing, not a maturity thing.
But even that's contradicted by the data records.
This is another area where I question the last three tapes to be found, because there's several recurring themes in the last three tapes that match the first three tapes. It's almost as if they were originally used to record the information that was on the first three tapes, and then that was copied over, and there's some residual data that's contaminating it. An example is in the first three tapes, there is reference to a member of royalty who is also or was also a senator. And in the second three tapes to be found, there is reference to a member of royalty, and she is also is or becomes a senator later. There's also some similar events, and I really question the recurring themes when it comes to the reliability of one set of those tapes.
Could it be that there are people who are trying to bolster some tapes by creating pseudo-epigraphy for the others, meaning they are making up the backstory to match, to try to bolster the credibility?
It
right to me.
certainly would motivate something like that.
And so the historical veracity of these things once again becomes paramount question. So, in the third data tape, the young hero, his girlfriend now with child, begins to have conflict with his mentors, and he in a sense takes on a new mentor, and this creates a problem that will drive the further storyline. But it seemed so implausible that this new mentor had anything really to offer him, except maybe relief from bad dreams. You know, Anakin was having bad dreams, and that was apparently all he was offered. That, oh, well, you know, you're worrying about something that you shouldn't, because I know how to get around it.
Change your diet. That's usually my first step.
For bad dreams. Alrighty. Are there any other points in the third data tape that talks about, addresses the nature of the Force? I think we did have in the third data tape a terrible experience.
Is this the deviation to the blood parasite?
That was only mentioned in the first data tape. Oh. In the third data tape, what should be our hero goes back to his place of birth, finds his mother briefly, but she had been captured and ill-treated, and the hero commits genocide. It's a very, it seems almost an unforgivable act that Anakin kills all of the men, women, and children of the Sand People out of this blind rage. And it sure seems that at this point, if the people he was interacting with had any genuine morals, they'll realize, we'd better not be training this guy anymore, because he's already gone off. He's demonstrated that he doesn't have a safety. And it's not like he didn't tell. He at least told his love interest. And if the rest of the Jedi knowledge and events, you would think they would sense this in him. It seems
right.
to be a great big gap in their
the logic
abilities
of it, yeah.
to have one of their own go that far off script, so to speak, and it not be detected or there not be consequences. So it seemed a grave moral issue there that was not caught and not resolved. So I guess from that we can certainly say that somehow the Force is not a force for good.
It's not very good at detecting when you have bred a sociopath and he's standing right next to you. That's clearly something they cannot detect.
They do mention, or at least say, that you can go to the dark side, which is apparently what he was doing. But at the same time, they didn't seem to be able to detect it and or
right.
stop it,
right.
or even make a concerted effort to do that.
Well, in the first discovered data tape, A New Hope, we get this idea from the narration, perhaps it's been tampered with, but that that Darth Vader can sense Obi-Wan, but it's apparently not something that you know, it apparently works only in close proximity, but apparently only when it's important to advancing the plot.
Right, right. It's very vague, and it only, like what you said, when there is a need to tell a story, that's when it comes about.
The backstory is that Obi-Wan is supposed to be the superior master, and apparently he didn't detect Darth Vader as soon as Vader had detected him. This allowed Vader to walk up on him, so to speak.
That could be the case. It could be that Kenobi was setting a trap or basically inviting him.
Well, if we can believe the narrator, Vader had sensed Obi-Wan's presence when Vader had walked onto the Millennium Falcon and they were hiding under the floors. But there was nothing where Obi-Wan had sensed Vader, even though you would think that Obi-Wan would be in this mode of saying, what's going on above us, as opposed to Vader, who is looking around and seeing an empty ship. So the more powerful, more experienced master conveniently didn't know that his former pupil was there. This gave Vader the opportunity to tell his forces that Obi-Wan is here. I think that was the setup where the Grand Moff, whatever his name is, said, "You, my friend, are the last of their religion." But it didn't seem to do him, it didn't do Obi-Wan a whole lot of good, this alleged Force sense. So, once again, a weak plot element. All right. Well, we've perhaps come to our program break time. Shall we do that?
I think we're ready for the
I guess
news.
we're going to do the news section here. So now for current news. A special warning to fellow bounty hunters. A large number of injuries resulting from smuggler pilots who shoot has been reported from several spaceports. When in doubt, fellow bounty hunters, shoot first.
And in the news, Grand Moff Haslam vetoes a controversial Book of the Force Act. In a surprising move, Grand Moff Haslam went against the senators, moving to establish the book as the official book of the Empire. A veto to overturn his veto has a vote to overturn his veto has subsequently failed.
Well, luckily we still have a republic working here. Sadly, we all mourn the tragic loss of the senator formerly known as Prince S. Leia. The Prince S., who was rumored to be a traitor and part of a rebel alliance, was also a long-time member of the Senate. She died, perhaps of the flu, at age 56. She, like her husband Han, have become one with the Force. Survivors include her son Ben and a brother Luke.
Without explanation, all freighter and transport departures to the construction project at the forest moon of Endor have been placed on hold. A press release stated that a weapons malfunction has caused the reactor leak. It was described as a large leak, very dangerous, and that departures are expected to resume after there is time to lock it down.
And finally, reports from medical droids across the galaxy have been coming in regarding unexplained, widespread bad feelings about things. It is recommended that if you encounter someone who states they have a bad feeling about this, you'd best get them to a medical droid as soon as possible.
Now, back to our program.
Didn't we, or were we taking the, that break? Back to our program.
The next part of our special covers a blog post by Paul Kent titled 9 Ways Star Wars Parallels the Bible on faithstreet.com. Paul Kent created a parody religion called Christianity based on the myth of the Force.
So, from the preface to his article, Paul Kent has authored 8 books and co-authored and contributed to many more. His life goal is to spur interest in the Bible for all readers and all ages. Paul has loved Star Wars saga since he saw the original movie poster at age 11. He is the author of The Real Force, a 40-day devotional. We asked him to list 9 ways in which Star Wars series parallels the Bible. So, how did he list?
Tatooine and humanity. Allegedly from the Bible, there's descriptions of humanity, and Paul states that that is somehow reflected in Tatooine, which is inhabited by humanoids in a desert environment, and that is described in the Bible. So here we have a very weak argument where...
And in the Bible, of course, we talk about humans as coming from
dust.
And going to dust. So that's this whole gist, that it's the Bible because it's a desert world?
I can find dust just about anywhere I go.
Even in space.
Exactly.
We come from dust.
There is a lot
space
of
dust.
that in space. All righty. You want to do number 2?
Sure. The parallel that he draws between Luke Skywalker and Moses. When Obi-Wan Kenobi calls Luke Skywalker to learn the ways of the Force and join the rebellion against the Galactic Empire, the younger man suddenly found all kinds of reasons to contradict this stated goal of leaving Tatooine. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of their slavery in Egypt, the adopted grandson of the Pharaoh argued against the job for 4 times, but ultimately both of them followed their calling and changed history.
So, how do you analyze that claim?
I think they've got a good claim just because it's some very common points in a story. Whenever someone's called upon for a monumental task, it's not uncommon to try and back out of it, try and find some way out of it. People call in sick Mondays for a reason. That's the hardest time to break the habit of taking a couple of days off.
What's really strange in the Bible is that right after they have the burning bush conversation and he sends Moses on to free his people, like the very next day, God comes after him in an inn and tries to kill him.
Decides to kill him.
Decides to kill him, tries to, apparently in the Bible is what it says. And the only thing that stopped him was...
his wife mutilates his son's genitals as some sort of appeasement.
He circumcised their son, with a sharp rock, took the foreskin and threw it at Moses, said, "Oh, what a bloody husband you are to me." And apparently that pacified God, and he didn't kill Moses. It's just one of the strangest passages I've ever seen.
So there doesn't seem to be quite a parallel between Moses and
You don't see
Skywalker in that.
You don't see that in the movies. No.
It doesn't seem like that's all a very good claim. Now, I'm guessing that this Paul Kent made this claim about Star Wars being inspired by Christianity maybe before it was alleged that Anakin was born without a father, because that is lifted out of it parallels the Christian claim. All right, I'll grab number 3, Count Dooku and Judas Iscariot. Once a Jedi Knight, Count Dooku walked away in apparent disgust with the Galactic Republic and Jedi service. Trained by the great Yoda, Dooku ultimately sided with the evil Darth Sidious. Maybe his original motives were pure, but at some point he crossed the line to an outright betrayal of all that was right and good. Judas Jesus once asked his own disciple, "Are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" No wonder the Apostle Paul told Timothy to hold on to faith and a good conscience, which some have rejected and so have suffered shipwreck with regard to faith. So, man, oh man, it's hard to see this Count Duco being Judas Iscariot so much as someone who was
He was known to be a political idealist.
there we go. Let's say a fanatic of his own kind, and if we're gonna make a contrast with betraying Judas Iscariot, with Judas Iscariot betraying Jesus, who did Count Dooku betray anyone to that caused the execution of? There really isn't a parallel to that.
That's an empty argument.
Yeah. What happens is he fights Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it's 2 against 1. They take him. It
Right.
doesn't seem a very good argument that that's somehow based on Christianity. All right.
You wanna try-
Major Derlin and the early church. Now this is a bizarre association between a rebellion officer in the Battle of Hoth who hid out in a hangar and the early church. And Paul Kent's argument is that Major Derlin was like those 3,000 unnamed people who responded to Peter's sermon, and in so many words, were all important to God's overall story. I think that's trivial. I really question that there might be some association between Major Derlin and Paul Kent.
After all, if you're about to start a military campaign, there's a certain moment you say, "Okay, everybody, man your stations." I've seen a lot of World War II films where that line's used all the time. Doesn't mean there's a religious connotation. There's
Exactly.
an organizational value.
Exactly. I think if you're going to carry out terrible acts, then every little person counts as well. So it has no value.
Not finding very many valid parallels here, but Darth Vader, or Darth Sidious, and Satan, well, of course, on the surface, there are similarities in what you would generally consider evil there. But for various reasons, including the politician-turned-dictator's penchant for deceit. As mentor to the young Queen Amidala of Naboo, the senator named Palpatine seemed exactly the wise and experienced leader needed to manage the crisis of the Trade Federation invasion. But we learn later that Palpatine himself, as an evil Sith Lord, actually initiated the conflict and orchestrated an attempt on Amidala's life. As Jesus once said of Satan, "There is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and a father of lies."
I think this argument's weak too, because if anything, what we have here might be a better parallel to the Hebrew Bible, not the Christian Bible, because we've got, let's see, a woman central protagonist who is also going to be the mother of those that follow. So she's a bit like an Eve character, if anything. And this Sidious is, sort of using Anakin's worry over her to cause the evil. It really doesn't look anything like the Christian argument.
It's nothing more than a weak argument to associate
comparison.
two antagonists in different stories.
Alrighty, I guess I grabbed this garbage masher in the fiery furnace. The Death Star trash compactor scene from Data Tape 4 is a metaphor for life. Sometimes in a world that is scary and dangerous enough by itself, you'll find yourself in a really tight spot. Boy, oh boy, weak, bad pun even. And frankly, it stinks. Weak, bad pun. 3 young Jewish nobles in Babylon, oh goodness, I'm going to mangle this,
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Were in a scary, dangerous world that demanded they bow to the golden statue of King Nebuchadnezzar. They chose to rebel and ended up in a tight spot, actually thrown into a fiery furnace, I guess. And the good news is God delivered them, though not from the flames.
Through, not from.
Yeah, they were apparently wandering around inside unharmed. On the other hand, the garbage masher, they were delivered from by robots.
Right.
And coordinated effort.
Yes. But he picked up the comm leak and said, shut down all the garbage mashers on the detention level, and the robots did it.
Any argument that compares a story about life or claims it's a metaphor for life, that's
Can be weakly
that's a
justified
very
at any
weak
level.
It's an easy argument to win. But the Death Star and Pride, it seemed invincible, but we all know the story well enough to recognize a weak argument. Vader admonished, I believe it was Grand Moff Tarkin, to not to be too proud of this technological terror they've constructed. So if you've got the understudy to who you're comparing to Satan, and he's telling others in the story, don't fall for pride, none of this lines up. None of this makes any sense.
Not only that, but the whole Christian argument is humility. Stay away from pride. Pride is a sin.
Well, I guess in that sense, Vader would be more echoing it, but I think Chad's argument, it demonstrates that it really that you can't say that. Oh, yeah, that's somehow a Christian thing.
All
right.
Parallel between Tauntauns and Providence. Tautons.
I think that's how it's
pronounced.
That's right.
Beasts. In the frigid wastes of the planet Hoth, Han Solo cuts open the abdomen of a tauntaun, pushing the freezing Luke inside. I thought they smelled bad, he said. On the outside, it's a disagreeable place to be sure, but in reality the safest spot for Luke, similar to some places that God puts us. The Apostle Paul faced flogging and beating and stoning and shipwreck on his work, but he was always safe in God's hands. Didn't he eventually get crucified?
The word safe somehow just seems to be the wrong word there.
Right,
it's like you're going to live hard and die brutally.
Yeah, like all of the disciples did.
Yep. All righty.
That doesn't make any sense.
So we got one quick last one. We maybe have time for our informational break then. In the Pontoon Eve pod race, young Anakin Skywalker careens over the landscape like a lightning bolt, late for a date, twisting and turning, climbing, plunging, fending off surprises, both random and evil intent. That's a lot like our lives. Some feature more twists and turns, some have more hills and some more valleys, but every life passes quickly. As Job said, my days are swifter than a runner, like eagles swooping down on their prey. That is why David prayed, show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. You have made my days a mere hairbreadth. The span of many years is as nothing before you. So, my goodness, we have something that amounts to a race car event. It's a NASCAR in space, and that's some metaphor for our lives.
It's another
Weak
comparison
analogy.
between life and life.
Yeah.
Well, my goodness. Do we need to do our sponsor break identification here?
Probably good to have it. In case you're just tuning in, this is a pre-recorded episode of Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions.
Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Knoxville Community Access Television Channel 12 or Channel 194, depending on your local cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
Today's show was pre-recorded and first broadcast on May the 4th Eve of 2016.
We've just made a deal that will keep the Empire out of here forever. Enjoy these informative videos from our sponsors.
All right.
Would you look at that? That sure is a whole lot of ground to cover. We live in a galaxy made up of nearly 200 billion stars, each with their own planetary system that needs monitored and policed. Because of our recent actions, our culture is thriving. We have imperial theaters, imperial films, imperial press, imperial art, and imperial broadcasting, which you are watching right now. And we are determined to defend our culture by any means necessary. That's where you come in. Young men and women from across the galaxy are signing up to do their part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part, even if I am a little short for a stormtrooper.
They're making a difference every day. Are you?
Our war is going better than ever, but we need heroes. Heroes like you.
Enlist in the Galactic Empire. Protect our way of life.
Come on, you Wookiees. Do you want to live forever?
The Emperor calls for bold new action. Total war against the rebel threat. Right now, the Rebel Alliance continues to mobilize, preparing to invade your neighborhood. But because of the Empire's finest and bravest, we can sleep a little easier at night. Not everyone needs to pick up a blaster. We need clerks, mechanics, pilots. If you have a skill, you have a place in the Galactic Empire. Head down to your local recruitment office today. Do your part. Make a difference.
Closing some last few subjects to discuss is this myth known as the Force.
In George Lucas' stories about the Battle of Yavin, Admiral Mahdi makes this statement to Vader: "Your sad devotion to that ancient religion hasn't helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes or given clairvoyance to find the rebels' hidden fortress." This is an homage to the tape Hidden Fortress, which was well known to have influenced George Lucas. That's how references work.
Alrighty. Obi-Wan cuts off an arm in the cantina, and then again, earlier in the order of events, it's all uncertain. Obi-Wan cuts off the arm of a shapeshifter. That would be off in one of those first 3 data tapes.
The problem is that none of the claimed religious influences are repeated. The most likely explanation is that conditions give the appearance of an overt influence by either the myth of the fourth or the parody religion is purely coincidental and in the eye of the beholder.
Let's start wrapping.
All right.
It's time to start wrapping things up. Get your pen and paper out. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Larry Rhodes.
And I'm Forceless Forest.
And I am Chad the Bounty Hunter. Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station and at 2200 Greenwich Mean Time and at ctvknox.org.
The opinions expressed on this show are produced for documentary or educational purposes and are of the hosts and not any official opinion of ASK or RET. We would like to thank Sam for technical support and the staff at CTV